Hi, everyone, and a special hello to Amanda, who is hanging out with us in the live chat tonight. Yeah, I hope you guys had a great week, but it's time for another write-in. So I'm really looking forward to that. I want to also say hi to Megan, who's joining me live on camera, although she's not on camera because for some reason her camera decided to malfunction tonight. So we have her voice, but we don't have her lovely face with us this evening. So Megan, why don't you just do a quick introduction of yourself and what you will be working on tonight?
Thanks. So I'm Megan, and I joined about 4 weeks ago. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been with the group. But I am mostly a young adult fantasy fiction writer, and I'll be working on editing, actually, a piece tonight. So that's where I'm at.
Nice, very nice, and welcome back. It has been a while since we've seen you, but I'm really glad to have a chance to hang out with you tonight. I think it's just going to be you and me because London is also unavailable, unfortunately, and I just got a message that Maria is possibly joining us a bit later as well.
Okay.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I'm also probably going to be editing. I have a scene that I have to finish writing. Actually, it sounds so random when I say I'm editing, but I'm actually writing a scene. It's basically in my revisions, I realized there was a continuity error because I said that a scene took place and then I just never wrote the scene. So now I have to write that scene into my book. So that's probably what I'll be focusing on tonight. So yeah, sorry, I'm just quickly notifying everybody that we're going live or that we are live. So
You're good.
very bad at multitasking.
Oh.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, Amanda says, hi there, I'm listening, just not able to answer, cooking vegan sausage and washing dishes. And she's asking Maggie, is that you? Yeah, so I am definitely not envious of Amanda for having to wash dishes. It's probably the most laziest thing that you can possibly punish me with to do. So I have a dishwasher, but because I hate washing dishes. It's one of my personality quirks that I have that I just don't like sticking my hands into that like dishwashing water and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Amanda says she thought she saw Maggie join, but Megan, that is you, right?
Yes. Yeah. One and the same person, just two different names.
Yeah, it's just I suppose it's your name versus your username from camp.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So, in case someone does watch back who's not part of our Camp Nano cabin, the three of us, Amanda, Megan, and me, we met each other doing Camp NaNoWriMo. And then this Camp Nano, when we decided to hang out in the cabin again, I made the suggestion of doing the live streams together, which is why we are now together live right now, actually. So it's funny how things work out, but I'm really, really glad that we actually started doing this because it's actually so much fun. Amanda says, "Oh, I hate dishes. We have a dishwasher. I just wash the pans and kombucha bottles by hand. I got the yellow rubber gloves from a dollar store. I hate the dishwater. I'm so glad I'm not the only one because I feel like I'm so finicky when I'm talking about like, oh no, dishwater, but no, I can't do it."
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tonight's topic, Jim made the suggestion. Although I think Jim will probably be watching this as a what do you call it? Later watch. He's not doing it with live with us tonight because he's working. but he had the suggestion about writing crappy first drafts and how it's actually necessary. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about it? Do you think it's necessary, or are you guys editors as you go?
Oh, that's a tough question. um, I, if I'm first writing something, to be honest, I probably don't edit it. You just, write flat out without stopping, and then kind of go back later, because when you're like in the moment of writing something, you just got this good idea and you want to stick with it. So that's kind of what I do first.
Mm. Yeah, I'm very much the same. I used to edit as I go, but then I just realized that I couldn't ever finish books, and I couldn't really tell why. So by like I think the seventh rough draft, then I kind of just started realizing that the reason why my books just always started to fall flat after the beginning was that I would have this thing of editing anything that was like special or different, because it's not something that was in the mental picture that I had in my mind. So then the moment it isn't fitting with what that mental picture was, I'd edit it out. And the problem was then that those things that I took out were actually really important, but I just didn't know why yet. And that's kind of what made me realize that I should actually just leave everything in, because it's only once I get to the end that I can really see exactly what the significance is of everything that went in. And then if something is meaningless, then I take it out. But usually, surprisingly enough, I find it's not ever insignificant if there's like a surprising thing that came into the book. So yeah, for me, I'm very much a finish first, edit later kind of person.
Yeah, because otherwise you're spending too much time, like say on the beginning or some section when you haven't even written the whole thing, and you kind of sometimes it gets harder to write that ending because you're just keep going back to the beginning and to the first things that you wrote.
Yeah, it's something that I've had to work on as well. I'm a perfectionist, so for me it's often the problem of being, you know, just telling myself that okay, really right now I need to stop. It's there, it's good enough, just keep going, because otherwise I do have this instinct to want to go back every single day and fix something. And if I allow myself to do that, like you said, you just don't make any progress, and you actually don't get to a point where you ever say, okay, this is done. And that's really frustrating, even, and very
Yeah.
counterproductive. I just want to say, Amanda answered. She says, I'm notorious at editing the first chapters as I go, but towards the middle to end, get it out, and then I go back to it. So that's actually, yeah, I suppose that's also a way to do it, because it's also if you're still getting into like the flow of things that you're still trying to figure out what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. So I suppose that's kind of where editing the beginning might still be a valid approach to writing, if I can put it that way. It's not something I can do, because as I said, I would never get out of like the first 5 chapters if I allow myself to edit while I go. So that's something I can't do, but I can see how that would be useful.
Yes.
And Amanda says, plus you may be polishing something that you're going to cut as time goes on.
That's true.
Yeah, very, very true. In fact, that's kind of the way I edit, is actually to edit from the big things first and then going to smaller, smaller, smaller until I'm proofreading. Because I hate this idea of editing a whole chapter that I end up just like cutting out of my book, for example. So I'm a very, very much a believer in doing things properly in one time. So that's I absolutely agree with Amanda on that. That's a very good point to raise.
Yes. Put all that work into one thing and then you're like, nope, let's scrap it.
Yeah. And also, this is actually part of why I am a rewriter. I find that once you've committed to something, for example, by writing it in a rough draft, it's it doesn't actually get easier to cut something else. You know, when they talk about cut your babies, or kill your darling, something like that, it actually becomes harder the more work you've already put into that darling. So the more times you've edited like a chapter or fixed a character or anything like that, the harder it actually becomes from an emotional point of view to actually just say, you know what, screw this, this has to go. It's not good enough.
Right.
And that is kind of something that I've also found that makes editing a bit difficult is if you go into something where you're holding on to it, because then it just really becomes almost impossible to effectively edit your book to get it to the best place that it can be. Because if you're not willing to let go, it just you're keeping the weak things as well as the strong things, and that's kind of very bad. That's a very terrible way of me for me to say it, but why? So too bad.
No, it makes sense.
So yeah, what should I just quickly check what's going on the chat? I'm still learning to juggle the chat versus the live stream. So yeah, so anyway, so nothing has happened on the live stream. I hate it when that happens. It's like I'm going to check the chat. And there's nothing. But yeah, so
That's what makes it real. You go,
yeah,
oh, I'm gonna do this.
yeah, no, it is definitely it's the for me especially, again, it's my perfectionistic tendencies. My videos when I actually vlog are much more polished. So it's more because I edit out all my mistakes and all my ums and ahs and stutters and mistakes and stuff. And then when I'm live, I'm kind of trying to be very careful about how I'm speaking, but then it still somehow manages. I still somehow manage to screw it up. So it's brilliant. Yes.
Success.
Yeah, but so Megan, I'm curious, how long have you been writing?
Oh gosh. Seriously writing, maybe since I was 12 maybe, because like when you're little you write like stories because you're just a kid and you just write a bunch of things. So I did that like as a child, but I think I really started writing with purpose once I was like maybe 12-ish, but I'm guessing at the age because I can't really remember what year it was.
Yeah, it's very similar to me. I also started. I actually it's actually funny, but and now it sounds like I'm bragging, and that's not why I brought this up at all. But
No, you're
I
good.
I published my first books, or not books, poetry when I was like 8 or 9. So that's kind of, so when I say I've been writing, I actually don't count when I actually started, because for me poetry was just an outlet. So it
Right.
was like, okay, let me go play with my dolls, and so that wasn't really serious. For me, I consider when I was 13, when I actually decided this is a book I'm going to write and I'm really going to get this one published. That was when I made that decision. That's kind of the year when I started to basically track it and say, well, I was 13, and that's when I started, because once I decided to do novels, I really just didn't really want to do anything else. Although I used my English essays when they were assigned to me for homework and stuff like that. I used it as practice, but my actual book was what my focus was on. So it's fun to know that you also started that young, because it's usually a lot of people when you say, "Oh no, I started at 13," they look at you like you're weird, because they're like, you can't seriously think that we think you were a serious writer at that age. And it's like, well, you don't know me at that age, buddy.
Yeah, you don't know what I went through back then. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. That was,
But,
yeah, when I first started writing like one serious story and stuck with one story, you know, instead of going off on multiple like little stories or something. So yeah.
yeah. No, that's exactly. I mean, for me, obviously, there are people who start out when they say they're writers. They do short stories and things, and that's absolutely also correct. They are writers, but I just don't consider short stories my medium. It's kind of, I suppose, like someone saying they're an oil painting artist versus a water painting artist. So for me, I did write short stories and poetry before that, but I just didn't take it seriously until I really committed to an actual long form story that I incidentally still haven't finished. So that's terrible. But it's actually something that I am still working on. But I call it my cursed book because it's now 4 drafts. And every time, the first one, my computer broke. The second time, someone ripped the motherboard out of my computer. The third time,
Oh.
I finished the rewrite. And then, as I was backing up, the draft and the original vanished off of my computer. And the fourth time is the one I'm now currently working on. But then I realized that, yeah, I wrote it and it's beautiful and it finishes, just not good enough. So I have to do it again. So I'm just like,
Oh.
yeah, it's crazy.
That is a lot to happen to one story.
Yeah, it's horrible. I don't know why that story just won't go through. And the thing is that as time has changed, I think you see, I mostly write speculative fiction, so mostly fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi, that kind of thing. But what I actually started on, funnily enough, was a Western romance because I just, for me, one of my favorite movies ever is Tombstone, and every time I see that movie, I'm like, I'm going to write a book. So, so that is kind of my inspiration. But the problem with it is that as things have changed in like the oh gosh, I think it is now going for the 18th year that I've been working on this book. The market has changed to the point where I'm wondering whether I should even be publishing it if I ever do finish it, which sucks. So, but that's life. One day, I think I'm kind of thinking about changing it entirely, like so that it is a bit more speculative fiction. But I haven't decided how to do that yet, so I don't know. I'm sorry, so it's currently languishing on the back burner.
Yeah, waiting for that spark.
So, what did we actually? I can't remember. Did I ask you what you are? No, you did say the young adult romance.
Yeah, young adult fiction, fantasy, I guess that genre area. I have to choose a genre. Or new adult, since that's an emerging genre. I like that as well. The idea of the new adult genre. I mean, it sounds kind of the name's but the idea of it that there's this other kind of category because it makes sense. There's like some fiction that's like you wouldn't have your children necessarily like at a younger age read it, but then it's not necessarily mature enough to be adult content. So.
Yeah, it's also something that I find interesting in terms of like age groups. I started out writing young adult, and then, but I also for example, the Western romance, the historical romance I mentioned, is actually an adult book, which is funny because I was 13 when I started writing it. So yeah, I had an interesting imaginary life. Anyway, but the new adult genre that what I enjoy about it is the that sense of you kind of move past what young adult literature is struggling with, like not what the characters usually are struggling with in terms of growing into a certain place, and now they're at that point where the young adult characters will grow to, and now you suddenly have to be an adult, but you're still not really there yet. So that's actually, I find that interesting. I find that like a fun, thematically speaking, a fun kind of area to start with. And so I actually enjoy writing new adult kind of books as well. Um, but I haven't actually gotten around to publishing one yet. So, but I actually have one that's finished. I just
Oh,
need to edit.
that's good.
Yeah, it's that one is, when I say new adult, it's actually it's yeah, it's new adult because that's kind of where I went for it. Was like this person who's just at the edge of having to step up into this adult role, and then it's just kind of everything gets screwed up royally for her because it suddenly happens in a dystopian world. So that's fun. But yeah, so definitely it's in my, let's see, I think in my top 5 of books that are books that I have to publish before I die. So that's kind of scary to think about, but yeah.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, it's just at the moment the thing about it is that the book that I'm editing right now is book 3 in a series, of which the first 2 books are published, but that I think will have at least 3 more books before the series is finished, and possibly at least 2 spin-offs. So they kind of take up the most of my priority. And then after that, I still have another series of which the first book is published, which need 2 more books. And then I can really start looking at new books that I need to start for publishing. And that's kind of where that book's kind of going to fall in. But yeah, I've seen that one, and another book that I'm not really going to go into right now is those 2 are my 2 non-published series books that I really want to get to, but I just never seem to get the time. It's really sad. Oh well, but so okay, so Jennifer Enderlin actually dropped by and she says, "Hi, I'm here. Hi, Jennifer. Pleased to see you here as well. Welcome."
Hi.
Yeah, so it's really awesome that we are hanging out. I have to say, because last week, I don't know how it happened. It's probably my own fault because I forgot to send you guys a reminder, and I feel terrible about it. But I just like, last week was crazy, so I had to do everything like at the very, very last second to get the live feed up, and then I I actually had to do like the first hour of the live stream I did alone. But then fortunately, Amanda actually saved me. And Sarah, who I don't think she's here tonight, I suspect she's not here. So Sarah Schwan, I think it's Schwanweber, not sure how you pronounce her surname, but she dropped, the 2 of them dropped in and they saved me. So we had a lot of fun doing some writing at least. So that was awesome. But it's really cool to have some people chat with right from the start, I have to say, because talking on a live stream when you're all on your own feels a lot like screaming into the void, and I'm not sure I enjoy that feeling quite a lot.
It's nice to have someone to actually talk to.
Yeah, that's definitely the most fun about having someone on the on camera with me, like you are now. So thank you very much. I have to say again, thank you very much for joining me, because it's just, you kind of have an immediate interaction, so it's not just the droning of trying to figure out what you want to say and what you want to add the whole time. And then also, because while the live chat is awesome, and thank you guys for joining me well, but the issue about it is there's a definite lag between the recording for the live stream and it actually going live and then having people respond. So you it kind of feels awkward sometimes if you're on your own and you're having to respond to chats, which is a bit sad. But one day I think I'll get the hang of it, but it's just not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Definitely. But yeah, it's difficult to explain, but it's definitely like, I love doing this. Actually, I have so much fun with it. That's why I do it every weekend, because especially now that you guys are joining me live every time, it's so nice to just have that interaction. I actually enjoy this even more than just doing my usual regular vlogs, because the vlogs are good, but there's no real feedback, like immediate feedback. Yeah,
Right.
that's a better way of saying it. The immediate reaction you get from having someone on camera with you, or even in the live chat, it's just so it's lively. So I love that. That kind of interaction is something that I'm quite enjoying, because it's also, I don't know if you guys also find it, but it's sometimes hard to find other writers that understand where you're coming from when you are talking about like the craft and the process and what you're going through. So it's nice to have people who actually understand and have them actually answering you as you're talking and get that feedback in that way. So that's fun. And I'm noticing that my hands are going all over the place. So I'm going to do this now. But yeah.
The benefit of not getting your camera working is that you can't be seen.
Yeah, it's I'm a very yeah, I talk with my hands, so I don't even notice it, and then when I notice it, it's like, oh gosh, my hands, what am I doing with my hands? But yeah. So I think, yeah, I'm trying to think, is there anything about writing crappy first drafts that you can think of that you actually want to say? Because I'm thinking of a few things, but I don't want to just have it be me talking, because I do realize that I talk a lot on this chat sometimes, and I'm trying to make it a bit more balanced. So what do you think, Megan? What about, like, I'm sorry, I'm probably putting you on the spot now as well. But what about writing for like crappy first drafts? If you have to talk to like a new writer, what would be like the first thing that comes to your mind when you talk about first drafts and how they are crap and it's okay?
I think, I mean, when I think about first writing a story and writing a first draft, focusing on keeping your character consistent, like who they are throughout
Mm,
the whole story, seems to be like something really important, because then like you don't have to edit that necessarily as much later, because you're not making this character who is suddenly like, you know, five different people at once.
mm,
Um, I think like sometimes, especially when you're first writing a story, some people get in the mindset of writing the hero or writing, you know, the main character that kind of triumphs over everything, or they always have, they're never awkward, you know?
mm,
So when writing a first draft, I think it's okay to have someone who's awkward, who has those moments where they trip and fall and stuff. So just,
mm,
even if it feels kind of difficult for you, or if it feels unnatural in some way, keeping with it. So just pushing past the things that feel uncomfortable and just keep writing it. Because I think with first drafts, the fear is, you know, getting something wrong. Because you were talking about how you're a perfectionist and wanting to get that, you know, get it right on the first try. And so that fear
mm,
of like, oh, what if I have to go back and rewrite it or rewrite all of it, kind of stops you from having fun with the story. So I think finding that enjoyment and like, um, sometimes it helps, I guess, to have other people that say, "Hey, stop thinking too much and just have fun with the story. See where it goes. You know, stop trying to dictate its path the whole way."
mm. No, that's very true. It's something that I found, that after I left my publishing house, there wasn't really much about being a writer that's signed to a publishing house that I missed, except for that fact that you have an editor who works for the publishing house and not for you as the writer, who is there, and she's going to say, give me that book. It's done. It's fine. It's good enough. We're going to publish this thing now. Because sometimes for me, it's really the most difficult thing, is to get to that point of saying, well, it is actually good enough. It's done. And that so I absolutely agree that that feeling of knowing when you have something that is actually good enough to actually just leave it, for, at least for now, even if it's just for, in terms of a rough draft of writing something and saying it's good enough for the rough draft. I can get back to it later if I don't like it. That's such a difficult thing for people who are perfectionistic. Not all people are like it. And I should mention, when we are talking about crappy first drafts, I find that writers have a way of splitting into two ends of the spectrum. So there are those who are always in this kind of mind space of, oh my gosh, this sucks. And then there are others who have this thing of, this is like the second coming of some holy person. So, you know, you don't really get, it's very rarely that we get like the normal middle way that's like, well, it's not perfect, but it's okay.
Yeah,
But you know,
that's true.
so it's kind of yeah. So for me, I tend to be on the, oh my gosh, this sucks end of the spectrum. And so to get to that point of saying, you know what, it's actually fine that it sucks. And it is actually good enough for now, because as long as it's written, I can edit it later. It's the stuff that you don't write that you can actually do nothing about. And that's something that I think non-writers don't always get, is they, or even new writers, they are so stuck on this idea of getting this thing exactly right in your brain before you write it down. And then the problem with that is it's never going to get there. So if you do that, it's actually never going to get onto the page.
Right.
And yeah, I think that keeps a lot of people back as well. Just this idea of it having to be perfect before it even gets written. Because I don't know about you, Megan, but like for me, I'll have something beautiful in my mind and then I'll write, and then it's like, what are words? Can I even English? You know,
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's that kind of feeling. And that's then you kind of, that's when my tendency wants to kick back in, and I want to go fix what I just typed because it's so pathetic and it doesn't match what's in my mind. But the odd thing is that usually if I leave a book, if I just leave it and I just write and I keep going and I don't go back until it's done, at the end, after let's say 3 weeks after I finished it, if I go back to read the book again, it's not that bad. It's not perfect. It's definitely not like draft. It's not like publishing level, but
Right.
it's definitely like, it's not worth burning. It's not that bad, and which is unlike what
Sure.
my brain would keep telling me about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's just sometimes you need a little bit of time after you finish writing to then
Mm.
look at it with a clearer mind and not as judgmental mind sometimes too, to say, oh wait, at least I finished it. There's something here and I
Mm.
have to work with this. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to say, Jennifer left a comment in the chat. She says, I'm definitely a this sucks person. It's probably why I'm a chronic first draft writer and I've never actually revised or edited anything I've ever written. Oh, Jennifer, I know. It's really, it's a very difficult thing to overcome. But it is something that we perfectionistic typewriters do. Typewriters, but us perfectionistic writers should actually be able to overcome, because yeah, it is actually something that holds people back, is this idea of getting so stuck on getting it out of not sucking that you don't actually get around to editing. And the interesting thing is, and people are always so surprised when I say this, except if they're writers, because then they know. But it's not really in the drafting that your good book is going to come out. It's actually literally when you're editing. It's going to be crap. A rough draft is it will never, I don't think, I think let me put it this way. I think if someone tells you or anyone that they write perfect first drafts, they're either delusional or they're trying to tell you something or they're just straight up lying. Because it's just I don't think it's possible. I'm really I know it sounds really like very judgmental, but I find it so impossible to think that all those like hundreds of balls that we're juggling to keep it in the air, to keep the story going. I'm talking about characterization. I'm talking about pacing. And not just pacing in terms of information release. I'm talking about sentence structure and flow. I'm talking about, motivation. I'm talking about plot and stakes and conflict and there's like a million stuff that's going on in every single sentence that you're writing. And you can't keep everything exactly just so in your rough draft. It's just not possible because there's just too much to a story to actually just do it correctly once off. And I'm saying this as someone who has already finished like 15 drafts. Um, it's I yeah, it gets easier. Let me put it that way. I find that yes, I do learn. So it does become easier to have more things correct at any given time just by writing it one time so that I have less to fix later. But it's never perfect. And it always sucks a little bit or a lot, depending on how challenging the book is that you're trying to write. Because some books are really
Yeah,
hard to
I
write.
definitely.
Yeah. So that's definitely it's something that I've also had to overcome. The first book that I published, um, I actually almost stopped writing. I actually, after 10 years of writing, and finally after 7 attempts, I finished my first book. And when I came to fixing it by rewriting and editing it, I almost gave up because I became convinced at some stage, and it was like within I think the first 10 chapters of my rewrite, I became convinced that I suck as a writer. I have no skills whatsoever. I can't do this. I couldn't see myself going on. And then I just kept going and eventually realized at the end of my rough draft that really Um, I'm not that bad. It's just as I don't know why. It's just as we write, there's this thing in our head that's consistently trying to tell us that we can't do it. I don't know if you have that as well, Megan, but I have like something that's constantly telling me that it's really not worth the effort because I'm not as good as I think. And yeah, so it's but
Yeah,
yeah.
self-confidence is often hard to come by. So,
Yeah.
definitely like saying, "Oh, I think this is good," can be a struggle because I'll be thinking, on the other hand, "Oh, there's so many writers that are published and their writing is amazing." And
Mm.
I love, reading it. And I think, "Oh gosh, I don't know if I could be as good as them." And the problem is when you come to comparing yourself. So,
Yeah, that's definitely, that's something that I've had to realize as well, because when I got started, and that's kind of where I think the first draft or so really fell down was, and that's also I have to mention that's where the whole editing as you go kind of idea for me came from, was this expectation that if I'm going to write something, it has to be at the same level as the published writer that I just read or the person who I'm looking up to. And that's actually nonsense. It sounds horrible to say, but you cannot compare your rough draft to someone that you don't know. Because if you know a person and you, for example, act as their critique partner, that is different because you're actually seeing at worst, you're seeing the rough draft. At best, you're seeing a rough draft that's maybe seen a rewrite and or one revision round. So you're still not going to see the polished final product. But the moment you're, for example, comparing yourself to, let's say, J.R.R. Tolkien
Uh-huh.
or to J.K. Rowling or to, George Martin, or
Right.
you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot, because it's like trying to compare yourself to, like, saying, I always say this is an analogy, but like it's like a high school student trying to play basketball, or baseball or whatever, some sport,
Right.
but comparing their success rate only with a highlights reel of some other sports star that they see on ESPN or something like that. So you can't do that, because you're only seeing the good things in a book that's already been published, because it's already been cleaned up. It's already been tidied up. They've already sorted out the characters. They've already, it's of course it's going to look that way. I would hope it looks that way, because I would dread letting out a book that I've written that's not up to that standard and having people pay for it. But that's the point. I mean, my published books have 30 rounds of edits in them. It's not the same as writing the first time and
Oh,
having, it's not going to look that way. And this is actually quite embarrassing to admit, but I've actually, when I've been rewriting this book 3 that I'm working on now,
yeah.
and as part of that, I went back now as I'm doing the. Okay, now let me just reverse a bit. When I write every single book that I'm getting ready to edit for publishing, I reread the previous books in the series, because there tend to be a lot of things that I purposefully left up in the air, and odds are I forgot something. So I have to read the books again so that I can pick the strings back up, especially if I've worked on other books or just taken a sabbatical or a hiatus from my book for a while for whatever reason. So I've had to do this now for book 3, because for various reasons, I've had to do multiple drafts of book 3, and then now this last draft of book 3 alone took me 2 years to write, because it was about 5 times as long as my longest book to date. So
Yeah.
that kind of sucked. But then the thing about it was that when I went back to the first book, that's the published version, I kept thinking, my gosh, did I lose my skills? How is my third book so terrible compared to my first book? It's like, oh, look how this is so flowing. It's so poetic. It's so nice. The voice and the characters' voices are so strong. Everything is getting across so well. Why is my third book so bad?
Why
And
is
then
it
I
so
realized, what
messy?
an
Yeah.
idiot. You only edited this first book like 30 times, and the third book you just finished the rewrite. So it's maximum got 2 passes of edits over them. So you can't compare the two. It's like, it's not even the same thing. And but my brain just does that. It's just like, oh my gosh, you just suck now, don't you? You're terrible.
Yeah, you are your own worst enemy, right? So you're always like thinking, well, oh gosh, this is terrible. It must be me.
Yeah.
The fact that you haven't edited it over, the same amount of times.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, yeah, I kind of think that, and that also kind of comes in with something that I read recently, is that, now I can't remember. I think I'm not exactly sure where I read it, but I think it was the New York Times or the New York Post, but I think it was the Times. That there was an article that says that they did research that shows that artists and creatives, for example, now writers, have no idea in terms of audience response. which books are good. So, for example, I might love one of my books, but then I'll publish it, and then it will actually just fall flat, and people just won't love it. And then another time, I'll just write something for shits and giggles that I'm just not, I don't really worry about the quality even as much, or for whatever reason, it's not in my brain, it's not up to that same kind of quality standard. And the readers will just love it. So writers are actually really bad judges of the quality of their own work. So I try to remember that when I'm feeling down on my own work, because it really does come down to that, is we're either too harsh on ourselves or we're not harsh enough. And it's really difficult to strike that balance and to actually just see the thing for what it is, because we are so, I think, so emotionally attached to what we're doing that we can't really take a balanced view. And that's kind of, I think, where that, oh gosh, this sucks kind of thing comes from, because it's just so, um, you want it to work so bad. So any kind of fault or mistake or something like that that doesn't make it as perfect as that thing you had in your mind, it's always just going to let you down so much that you kind of think that it's much worse than it actually is. I just want to say Jennifer just left a comment in the chat, and she says, completely agree about not comparing yourself to already published works. That's one hurdle I'm actively trying to work on, and these writings and our Discord group are definitely helping. I'm really glad to hear that, Jennifer. That's really awesome. I'm glad if this helps you even a little bit, then it's even better that you're doing it. But yeah, so I think, shall we maybe get some writing done, Megan? What do you think?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, cool. I think let's do a quick uh 10-minute sprint, and then we can chat maybe a little bit longer again, and then we can do some more sprints. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to count down, and then I'll see you in 10 minutes. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time. How did you do, Megan?
Since I'm editing, I made it to page 5.
Well done. I think I wrote, let's see, let me just highlight it so that I can count the words. I think I wrote small amount, but given the fact that I actually haven't really been writing anything for over a month, I think any amount that I'm managing is quite well done for me at the moment.
Yeah.
I wrote 100 words, 119 words to be exact. So that's, yes.
Oh, good.
That's really not too bad for 10 minutes. Let's see what our friends have said if they wrote in with us. Let's see. No response yet. If anyone did write in, do let us know your word counts or what you were doing in your 10-minute sprinting time. But in the meantime, I suppose Megan and I will have to fill the air with some conversation. So,
yeah, something to say.
Yeah, so maybe, Megan, do you want to share a short excerpt of what you worked on?
So I've been editing from the beginning, so you can hear the very first words that I've got on the page from chapter 1.
Awesome.
Okay, so I guess brief summary or introduction to this story. This is the story that I was working on 4 weeks ago when I was working on the middle. So I actually managed to finish revising the middle and all those other parts. And now I'm just kind of working on editing the whole thing at once. So that's fun. All right, so I'll start and I'll read maybe like the first couple of pages. Not even the towering walls of a city can keep a dust storm out. It bore down like the wrath of the gods to consume the circular city of Kvyat. The sky darkened with the swirl of sand, aided by the fall of night. I pulled at my cloak to cover my mouth and nose. Growing up in the desert, I knew not to inhale the coarse grains. You could choke on them. The desert was unforgiving that way. In front of me, the dark shape of Hadar's cloak flapped in the wind. The howling gale gained strength with each passing moment. The glow of a lantern, dimmed by the rushing sand, indicated a safe haven to weary travelers, hopefully an inn with room for 2 more customers. I stumbled after Hadar, fighting the push of the wind as it threatened to send me tumbling into the ground. His hand found mine, giving it a comforting squeeze as we bent our heads to avoid the oncoming rush. The walls of the inn diminished the noise of the storm. Hadar dropped my hand as we entered the main eating room to brush off his cloak. Grime and drink stained the whitewashed walls. Wobbly wooden tables divided the room into 4 quadrants. 4 long tables stuffed with men from all over, cloaks, coats, and robes squeezed together to share in greasy food and drink. Along the back wall, a counter served ale that could send you under the table. Beyond that, a door led to the kitchen, judging by the barmaids that swung in and out of it laden with trays. They carried steaming bowls of food. The strong scent of spices threaded the air, making my stomach rumble. It had been a few days since we'd eaten a decent meal. A great burly man with a long black beard guarded the counter and the money box. His arms crossed over his chest as he surveyed his patrons. His loud voice snapped as a barmaid almost dropped a tray, and she shied away from his glare. On the other side of the room, the roar of the hearth fires drowned the room in heat. Hadar removed his hood, shaking the sand away. The coarse grains still clung to the folds of his cloak and his ash-brown hair. I brushed absently at the grains that roughened my face. Your sister, I reminded him, putting a hand on his arm to make him face me. He grinned. Of course, my dear sister and I trying to find work in the big city. The usual story. Ruana? I rolled my eyes. He knew the game as well as I. Just make it sound convincing. Alright, so that's a little bit of the beginning. I just wanted to introduce you to my 2 main characters, Hadar and Ruana. So that's about it.
Yeah, well done. I really enjoyed it. I like the vivid description. I just really love it because it just completely immersed me in what's going on. I could actually see what you were talking about. So you're very good with your description. So
Thanks. I'm glad. That's the hardest part about sometimes the stories, having your readers see what's happening. So, whew, that's a relief.
No, it's something that's I spend one of my editing rounds is to go over just to make sure that my readers can actually see what's going on. So it's really cool that you can do it so well, and it's a good I want to say talent to have, to be able to get that across so well, because it is something I don't think people realize it, but even writing a book or reading a book, it's actually very visual, because we should be able to actually see what's being told on the page. So having it so well described is very cool. Very, very, very well done.
Oh, thanks. So do you want to read your words? Or...
Yeah. This is still in a very rough draft form, but okay, let me. Yeah, this is actually what I'm currently working on, because I'm having to write it. It's only a short bit. But yeah. Right, so Gawain peeked at Callan while they made their way up Pendrin Castle's staircase. They couldn't talk about what had happened with Auric earlier. It had been bad enough trying to figure out how to explain her rush to get to the changing room to the guards. Naturally, they had to go with her feeling ill, but it probably wasn't the best thing to go with, even though her skin was still translucent with pallor 15 minutes later. She might not have known this yet, but the slightest whiff of scandal could have the five house lords pounce on her. But then, people making up anything about Callan's illness was considerably better than the truth. He upped out a breath and pointed these guys a few steps up the staircase. He hated Auric for putting Callan through this, for torturing her at the slightest provocation. She didn't deserve it, and Gawain was all but powerless to protect her. At least until he and Kayla could find a way to get Auric out of Callan's soul. There had to be a way. The alternative was impossible to conceive. An icy shiver raced along his limbs. And that's where I got before the end of my 20 minutes round.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely like getting in with the characters. I mean, it's a snippet, so you get into that moment and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know too much about your world per se, but I mean, it's definitely making me interested to see where it's going.
Thank you. Yeah, it's for me it's a bit difficult, because this is literally, I think, on page, let me just see, page 71 of the third book. So it does actually, I understand what you're saying. It's a bit hard for people to just drop into the middle of the book, and it's not even just the middle of the book, it's the middle of the book that's in the middle of the series. So it does make sense. So I'm happy to hear that it's like, you didn't want to know what happens next, because that's a good sign.
Yes. So when people reach that part in the book, the 71st page, they'll be like, yes, let me see where it goes from this one moment, Do you
No,
know that?
definitely. Yeah, no, it's very much that, because people always talk about, oh no, you have to have a hook, and you have to have, a strong first chapter. But for me, I think that the first chapter is only there to hook the reader into the second chapter, that's there to hook the reader into the third and the fourth and the fifth, and so on. So for me, it's nice to know, especially in the beginning, that my earlier chapters are still capturing, kind of the attention of what is going to happen next. Because otherwise, if I can't do that, then it's very difficult to sustain interest for 1,041 pages at current time. So scary.
Yes.
Jennifer just let us know. She said, I spent my 10 minutes chopping vegetables for the cookout later. Does that count? Absolutely, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the title, and it's going to be The Live Writing and Vegetable Chopping, because I think Amanda is also doing something with veggie sausages. So there's definitely a vegetable thing going on tonight.
Yeah. Vegetables are delicious.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay. So shall we do another 10-minute sprint?
Yes. Let's do it.
Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm going to count down again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time. How did you do, Megan?
All right, I made it to page 14.
Nice going.
So yeah, a lot better than the last time.
Yeah, I think, let me see. I did. 335 words. So I don't know how I was so quick this time, but it went well. Let me just hit save before I lose it.
Save, back it up. We're safe.
Whew, okay. Do you want to share another excerpt?
Sure, I'll probably just pick up where I left off, so you just keep going with the story. Plus, you
Cool.
know how you read something, it helps you edit it because then you realize whether something's actually wrong when you read it
Yeah,
out loud.
absolutely. It makes a massive difference.
All right, so let me just find the spot I left off. Okay. So, Hader walked to the counter at an easy, self-confident pace. I followed, avoiding eye contact with the many inebriated patrons. A few men's eyes latched onto me, but none of them made me feel like I needed to reach for my daggers. Any man that reached for me would find himself missing a finger. Mercy couldn't be afforded when desert men couldn't be scared off with just a look. Hardened by eking out lies in one of nature's harshest environments, it was enough to turn a civil man savage. So I kept an eye out as Hadar conducted business with the innkeeper. Have you got a room for the night? Hadar asked the bearded man. He grunted, uncrossing his arms. Been a lot of folks coming in tonight, but I might have one left. Well, my sister and I will be one of your cheapest, Hadar said. Our money strings lay loose in our pockets, too few zins to keep them tight. Since the city lay within the boundaries of Dariat, a country known for its lawlessness, we hoped to tighten our strings soon. Bounty hunting jobs soared in Dariat. The monarchs of its greatest cities failed to keep order even within their own walls, and thus it was every man for himself. The bounty offices supplied information about the current jobs, and the posters updated daily. A profitable enterprise. Any person without a trade might consider bounty hunting, if not for the unsteady work and dangerous tasks it took to complete the jobs. Still, competition was higher in a place like Kiviet, and we would not be alone in a job's completion. Hadar finished haggling with the innkeeper and directed me toward a table closest to the stairs. Enough room on the bench for two on the end, so I took the cusp of the seat, sitting with half my bum in the air. Hadar held up two fingers, signaling a barmaid to bring us two steaming bowls of greasy soup made from a lamb's tail fat. Wilted green pieces swam in the liquid. They might have been vegetables. A rarity, considering they would have to be imported from one of the countries that had land fit for farming. The girl gave us two wooden spoons and I scooped it into my mouth. The hot oil burned my tongue, a searing pain before it faded to numbness. I spat the soup into the spoon, blowing hard. Hadar's laugh rumbled next to me, vibrating my side as he slowly blew on his own soup. I snarled, elbowing him. Several days of travel through Daria hadn't improved my mood. I was tired and couldn't wait till we got to our room. The edge of the bench tried my patience and my strength as I carefully ate the rest of the soup. It settled heavily in my stomach, but the growling subsided. When I scraped the bottom, he nudged my arm. Are you done? Hadar asked. I'm not sure I could eat more, I said. My tongue feels swollen. That's what you get for shoveling your food into your mouth, he said. Patience is the holiest of traits. Well then, I'm definitely not a saint, I said. He chuckled as we got to our feet. All right, that's where I'll stop for now.
Nice. Yeah, I like your interaction with your characters as well. So I think you have a really nice beginning here because it's definitely setting everything up very nicely to show like where they are right now. So I like it very much.
Just remember, this is like drafts like 10 of, like so many edits. So,
But you can see the edits, not in the bad way of saying, well, I can see you edited it, but like you can see the positive effects of having put in the work. So I think you can really be proud of it. It's very nice.
Thanks. So you added about like 200 or so words, right? So
yeah. I think I'm just going to start at like a spot. Let me just see where I was. Okay. Okay. She sighed softly, her head drooping forward. Damn, they shouldn't have pushed ahead so soon. The staircase was difficult for even the fittest of people to climb, and Callan wasn't strong enough to keep up with them. At best, her knees were going to be wobbly. Gawain reached out and caught his fingers on the folds of her cloak. Let's take a breather. She came to a stop and turned to him, her shoulders slouching ever so slightly. Their guards halted as well, keeping their hands on their sword pommels. It was reassuring to see their intent to protect Callan. Whatever the politics around the houses and the night, these guardians were willing to lay down their lives to keep the future Queen of Nodane safe, even though they knew she was completely unaware of her new status. Callan's gaze caught on his. I'm fine now, she murmured in Loris, but she wasn't. He could see the shadows in her eyes still. Cool. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, that was good. I think the same thing as well, just kind of getting the mood of the characters, like understanding like how they're feeling and like that exhaustion that you're portraying and sort of the weariness that they're all feeling really comes through. I think especially in the way that you're describing it and just like the dark shadows under the eyes and how they all just kind of they're tense, gripping their swords, but they're not, you know, like moving too quickly per se. Like you can feel that, so that's good.
Cool. Yeah, it's getting across, so I'm really happy about that. So yeah, I think let me just see. I don't know if any of our compatriots are still with us at the moment, so I think shall we just jump into maybe our last sprint for tonight?
Yeah, let's do that then.
Okay. Shall we make it a little bit longer?
15 minutes then?
Okay, let's do that. Okay, 15 minutes. I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time. How did you do, Megan?
All right, so I'm on page 24, so 10 pages more.
Well done. Well done. Well done. Let me see where I was. There we go. Let me just highlight. Of course, now it's not letting me highlight the things that I want to highlight. I went a little bit slower this time because I'm. Oh no! Wow, pleasant surprise. Another 293 words. So that was more than I expected. But I'm actually busy. I'm kind of having a nice moment here, so I'm lingering a little bit more than I probably should for
Yeah, I don't blame you when you hit those nice moments.
Yeah, it's like a how can I put it? This character is he's got like a real charm to him, and then he kind of he sometimes just does things that's so sweet. So.
That's nice. I love when they can make me laugh.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I'm just writing something and I just start laughing because it's just funny or I don't know.
Yeah, and at the moment though, for me, this is like more like a fangirl squeak, kind of like he's so cute. Kind of
Oh,
yeah, I know. It's sad. But
not sad. That's sweet. I think it's sweet. I mean, because I do the same thing. So
yeah, I think we have to do it. If we don't love our characters that much, you can't really make a reader like them that much. So it's kind of cool to do it.
yeah, that's true.
So one more excerpt from you.
Yep, we'll pick up where we left off. So they just finished their dinner. The innkeeper gave Hadar a candle and flint. He handed it to me as we walked to the stairs. We climbed a flight to the next floor. Not a sound echoed down the long hallway. It seemed most of the occupants sat in community merriment downstairs. I lit the candle as Hadar pulled out a rusty key. The first room lay directly across from the stairs. A thin door guarded its entrance. Hadar inserted the key, but it wouldn't unlock. He jiggled it and twisted, thrusting his shoulder into the door. Finally, it popped open, squealing on its hinges. Home sweet home, at least for the night, he said, entering the room. I glanced around as he shut the door. The walls were cracked and chipped in places. A strange odor lingered as if something had been recently cooked in it. Completely barren without a piece of furniture. Not much, but it had the essentials: four walls, a ceiling, and most importantly, a door that could be locked. I shook my head, letting my dark hair tumble down my back. It felt sticky, and sand braided it into knots. Irksome to say the least, but it was one of the things I could control in my life, so I preferred to have it long. My shoulders relaxed in the privacy the room gave us. One tiny window looked out on the world, but on a night like tonight, with the dust storm pounding to come in, the small opening gave us more protection. I set the candle on the ground. Its light made shadows on the walls as we moved around. Good enough to rest your head, Hadar grinned, stretching himself out on the floor. I tapped the ground with the heel of my boot, hard as rock and stained like a drunk's shirt. Not the most comfortable place to sleep, but certainly not the worst either. I'd slept on the ground more in the past few years than anywhere else. Sleep would come eventually, even if it wasn't a bed. For tonight, it's okay, I said. How many zens did you pay? 4 coppers, he said, which reminds me. He sat up, holding out his hand. I huffed out air through my nose, digging into a pouch on my belt. It weighed too lightly as I plucked my money string from it, and the copper zens jingled together. I removed 2 from the string and threw them at him. Easy there, he said, dodging the flying coins. They rattled onto the ground before he scooped them up in his fingers. I'm not trying to lose an eye. I snorted. And I don't want to lose any more zens. This room isn't worth half a copper, much less 4. Well, next time you can haggle, he said, lying back down. He lifted his gun up and checked his case. And I need to go shopping for bullets tomorrow. All right, so that's where I'll cut off for now. But yeah, so we're just settling in for the night.
It's nice. So is it like a more like a bit more modern? Like you mentioned that you're doing something like a fantasy, but it sounds like not really medieval, but more a bit later maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, like it's not our world, but
Yeah.
it's so similar that to put it with a time period, like I guess like late medieval, maybe, but not too modern, because most technology, well, has been invented in the last 100 or so years. So definitely not, you know, our modern day, but it's not ancient. So I don't know,
Yeah.
so it's a time periods in some ways.
Cool. No, because that's what I was thinking, that it sounded like it's a bit old-timey, but it's not like quite as old-timey as what I'm heading towards. So that's kind of what I was, because for me, I don't really have the guns thing going on. So it's interesting to hear it, because it's not something I hear often when I do fantasy. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Let's see. I think uh, I think we are currently the only ones. So our vegetable cookers and choppers have left.
Oh,
Oh, I know. Yeah, but let's see what I've wrote here. Uh, I'm just going to start off more or less where I stopped before,
okay.
just to pick up the string again. Okay, Callan's gaze caught on his. I'm fine now, she murmured in Morris, but she wasn't. He could see the shadows in her eyes, along with the flickering reflections of flaming torches lining the staircase's golden walls. She shivered, both from the staircase's perpetual biting cold and the terror that remained after Ulrich's near possession. Here, Gawain said, loosening his own cloak and throwing it over her shoulders. A soft noise escaped her. No, Gawain, you need this. I'll be fine. He grinned wide, hoping his charming facade would reassure her, despite everything else going on. But it's freezing, she protested, catching his hands before he could close the clasps. Energy shot up his arms at a touch. At so soft her fingers were, so deep her gaze as it met his. He let himself linger in the moment, dragging it out for as long as he could without making her uncomfortable. I've experienced worse. She didn't move her hands from his, but she didn't push his hands away either. They stayed that way, gazes locked, barely breathing, as if in fear that the tiniest sound would shatter the moment. Yet he wanted to move closer, to pull her closer to him and hold her until her fears faded away. She would allow that, he knew. She liked his embrace much more than she even realized. The strange thing was that she never quite allowed herself to want it, almost as if she was afraid he wouldn't want to hold her for some reason. No, that was exactly it. She was afraid he wouldn't be there for her, completely oblivious to the hold she had on his heart, as stunning as that was. Despite the fact that he never hid his interest, despite the fact that she could get him to make a complete fool of himself without even trying, she was completely oblivious. So yeah, that's kind of where I was.
Oh, that is so cute. The poor little guy. I guess not little, but you know what I mean. It's just like, ah, heartbreaking for that kind of like pining after each other, and they're both like too nervous to say anything.
Exactly. And also it doesn't help that they have like all these guards around them. So
That too.
yeah, so but that's definitely like um this is uh definitely something that started in the first two books already, and then it's kind of getting to a point. But the thing is, she's kind of oblivious in the sense that as a character she kind of grew up being rejected a lot, so, and being let down, so she's kind of afraid to even want to hope that something would work out with anyone, even a friendship. So despite the fact that he is like and has proven himself willing to go die with her if she wants to go die, she's still kind of like, no, he can't possibly like me. So sad.
Yeah. Ugh. They're just like crossing paths so close to each other, but not close enough. They don't see each other.
Yeah.
Uh, well, you are going to make your readers just like grip their hearts and scream at this moment.
Well, some of them, approximately half of them, because there's this other guy. So I have a love triangle going on, and some people love this one. The others are like, no, they will stab his eyes out. He has to back off because the other guy needs to.
My gosh, that's harsh.
And it's not. I'm not even kidding. Those are. I'm quoting what people have said, like on Wattpad about this.
Ooh, they really love their fan fictions about who's going to end up with whom.
Yeah, that's actually the most interesting thing because I thought like yeah, I think you missed when I talked about it last week in the week or the week no, it was the week before. We talked about Wattpad and I basically put my books up just to get the readers in the hope that some of them would like it. But you know what, the intensity with which they actually got into the two books that I put up there was really like I want to say shocking, but it wasn't really because of the amount of work I put into it, but it was so, it makes me so happy to see that they get that engaged and that like, oh my gosh, I'm this guy's fan, I'm that guy's fan. I really like these characters, you know. So that's probably the best part about writing at the moment. Not other than the actual thing about writing, because the pleasure from writing itself is awesome.
Yeah.
But just to actually have something out and to have people actually responding so well to it. And it's not just like, yes, it's nice. It's really, they get involved with it and they ask stuff about the books and the world that I built and stuff. So they're really deeply invested. So I really hope this book lives up for their expectations because I don't want to let them down. That's the big thing.
Yeah. I understand that. You definitely like you feel in some ways that pressure to write this thing that they will enjoy because they're the ones asking you these questions. They're so invested in it and they want
Mm.
to hear more because they're like, your world is real to us. Show us
Mm.
more of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's the biggest thing is just so I just so I'm really glad that even that if I write this now and I read this to you and you're responding positively to it, because then I can imagine once I've actually edited it, then it's going to actually go very well, hopefully, and it's going to do a
Yeah.
good job in the book.
Well, cool. This was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight and for keeping me company as I did this writing. It was really nice.
Yeah, it helped me sit down and really start editing because I needed to. So this was good.
Yeah, it's a very nice way to get some accountability because that's something I sorely lack at times. I kind of, if I have nobody asking me, so when is this book coming out? I kind of forget to write. So
Yeah. Oh, I want to ask you real quick. Can I
yeah.
share your channel like on my Facebook or
Mm,
something? Just kind of talk about it.
yeah, absolutely. And I am trying to actually schedule these ahead of time. So if I post it on like Discord or anything like that, the only thing you can't really, I don't really want to share is the Hangout
Oh yeah,
link.
no, I'm not gonna share that.
But
Just like
yeah,
your YouTube channel, where all the videos are.
yeah, you can share that, and you can also share the first link that I always share, the one that's actually to the video itself.
Okay.
Because then people can just sign up there for their reminder and notification once we go live. So
Okay.
you're welcome
Cool.
to do it. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Cool. So I think um we should just maybe sign off here, and then I'm going to host another one of these same time next week.
Okay.
And then for whoever is watching this on playback later, it's going to be 5 p.m. South African time or 11 a.m. Eastern. And then I haven't decided what the topic will be yet, so we can decide on Discord and get back to it later. And then also, if anyone is going to watch this on playback, please do feel free to leave a comment and just ask any questions and make suggestions for topics that we can consider for future live writing topics. All right. Thanks again, Megan, and thanks to everyone who did join in the chat. And I'll see you guys next week. And good luck with your writing and editing and chopping vegetables. So.
That's all
Bye-bye.
those vegetables they were chopping. Bye.
Bye.